FINRA's machine-readable rulebook initiative is really an effort that's designed to make the FINRA rulebook easier to navigate and understand, both with respect to individuals like you and me, but also with respect to computer systems. The initiative is composed of three parts. The first involves the development of a taxonomy, and by taxonomy, we mean a set of terms that can be legal terms, business terms, but key terms that help identify what each of the rules relates to. For example, one key term may be disclosure, and so we would tag all the rules that contain a disclosure element with this tag. Another key term could be record keeping, and we'd likewise tag the rules with that tag and so forth. Once you have the rules tagged with appropriate terms, then you can access the information in the same way that you would do with things like online shopping sites like Amazon. For instance, on Amazon, if you're interested in looking at a certain type of chair, where it be kind of a certain height, a certain brand, or a certain color, you could go to a pull-down menu and kind of specify which types of criteria you're looking for, and then it'll pull down the set of chairs that meet your criteria. In the same way, once you have the rules that are tagged, then you can say, you're a certain type of firm that cares about things like, say, for example, like we're talking about record keeping and disclosure requirements, and the rules that contain those elements would show up and make it easier for you to kind of identify which rules that you may be concerned about. Now, we went through the process of tagging 40 of the rules, and those 40 rules represent about 50% of the page views that we get on FINRA. Now, in addition to this first element of kind of developing that taxonomy and laying it over the rule book, the other two elements really involve the delivery mechanisms for the taxonomy, so that can be easier to digest both from a computer to computer as well as from a human to computer. The human to computer delivery mechanism is an enhanced search tool that we refer to as FIRST. This tool is available on FINRA's website and can be used to search rules based on the key terms in a much similar way as I described with kind of the online shopping experience, where you can tag certain types of items that you're concerned about, whether they be, things like, the firm that you are, for example, clearing and execution firm, you may care about debt securities and so forth. You can tag those criteria and identify the rules that apply to you. The other delivery mechanism that we have is designed for a computer-computer interface, which is the API protocol that allows you to download the entire rulebook along with all the applicable search terms, all the applicable tag terms that may be involved. What this allows you to do then is basically link up your own internal policies and procedures potentially with the tags that are contained within the rulebook. So, for example, if there's a change in a requirement that relates to a record-keeping requirement, that tag would show up on the rulebook, and a tag would potentially show up also on your policy and procedures, so you know you need to update those types of policies and procedures. We've received a lot of fairly positive feedback on the initiative, specifically around kind of areas, for example, for new firms that may not be familiar with the rulebook, so they can help identify kind of what may apply in their specific situation. But also from kind of more sophisticated firms that allows them to kind of help facilitate the automation of the compliance process. The impetus for this project really dates back to a special notice on innovation that we put out back in 2018. And there we asked a series of questions about the merits of developing a more digitized method for accessing rules. As part of that, there's quite a bit of support to explore this in more in-depth kind of ways, which ultimately led to the development of the machine-readable rulebook prototype, which we put out last year. As part of the special notice that we put out more recently last year, along with kind of the machine-readable rulebook kind of different elements I spoke about, we had an economic analysis section where we talked about kind of what the potential impact would be from kind of a market standpoint, both in terms of the benefits the industry would potentially be able to have kind of qualitatively as well as potentially quantitatively. And what we found there is that there's potentially significant cost savings for firms with the use of these types of tools in terms of their compliance program, and potentially an enhanced ability to have a more effective compliance program as well.
2022 for Clausematch has been very interesting because we previously, before 2022, we worked primarily with global financial institutions like global banks and tier one financial institutions, banks, and asset managers. But 2022 really was the year when we started getting a lot of interest from smaller financial institutions, and it just shows that compliance is becoming more and more important for even smaller financial institutions who might not have hundreds or thousands of compliance people in compliance departments, but actually just a few people working on compliance, and they're implementing technology now as well to deal with issues. On the other hand, we also have invested heavily into R&D on the regulatory side, and that was the culmination of that work was the release of the knowledge graph and the digital way to apply machine learning to rule books of regulators, and that was the work we've done with one of the regulators, which was practically having subject matter experts from a regulator going through the rulebook, tagging the rulebook with the taxonomy terms and various tags, and then applying machine learning to that data set in order to tag the remaining of the regulatory data, which was done with very high precision. And actually, this is one of the kind of one-of-a-kind data set now released into the public in order for others to be able to take that data set, teach the machine, train the models, and then apply to the specific rule books that regulators would like to tag. I think the knowledge graph is, I guess it's a well-known term for data science people and developers, but knowledge graph is a way to represent a graph database in a visual way. So in effect, what you're seeing when you're viewing the knowledge graph is how the data connects to each other across the data set. So a simple example, if we take a term loans or credit cards, it would be a node within the knowledge graph. And then you would see everything that is related to credit cards, for example, as a product. You would see the documents which are related to it, other taxonomy terms which are related to it. And then you can explore it in a visual way, how all of that data is related. Equally, for example, you can start from credit cards, see that there are 5 obligations in the specific regulatory document related to credit cards. And then if you go further, you can say that credit cards are also a product which is provided by the financial institution, and that financial institution has got 10 procedures and policies which are related to that, down to a specific paragraph which talks about how we issue cards, how we do AML KYC for customers which are taking credit cards, and so on. On our side, we see huge opportunities for institutions to be able to consume regulation in a much friendlier way, understand what is applicable to them, how it's applied, but also map. I think a bigger opportunity actually in the industry is that allows you to start mapping, and that's what Haimera said previously, start mapping internal processes, policies, procedures, controls, and even systems to the regulatory data set, which then allows you to understand the impact. Imagine you've got a particular regulatory document changing. You can see the waterfall down effect on everything within the organization that is mapped to that specific regulatory change. And that is what 99% of our customers are trying to achieve, but it's not easy and it's not fully possible unless we digitize the rules which are governing everything that the organization is expected to do. In long term, is imagine you've got one change in the regulation or a new regulation, and you understand at a market level the impact of that new proposed change. That would be huge. That could drive the regulatory policy in a much more informed way, if you could see the impact at the market level?
So I think, I maybe ask the question a little bit differently from our perspective. It's really to the extent that the industry wants to move towards digitized rule books or have a way of having greater regulatory intelligence associated with the rules. We want to be able to facilitate that in a way that's consistent with kind of our broader mandate, which is like investor protection and market integrity. And really, we see this effort of development of machine readable rulebook as potentially doing that, because what it does is it allows firms to potentially have a method for enhancing their compliance efforts in a way that's more effective, both from a cost perspective method, but also in a way that potentially allows them to kind of devote resources to potentially higher skilled levels of compliance that can be kind of the time for which can be used instead of the time that may be more labor intensive for looking at specific rules or looking at specific issues. And as we've talked with firms about this, I think one of the things that they've really pointed to is the desire to be able to make sure that they're not missing things. For example, if a new rule book comes, if a new rule gets changed, or a new rule comes out, I should say, or current rule gets changed, they want to be able to make sure that they're updating their policies and procedures in the appropriate manner. And this tool potentially allows them to do that in a more effective way.
Yeah, definitely. And this is exactly what the industry has been asking for a long time. In practice, just to give you an example, large asset manager operating across 40 countries has got many compliance officers in every country, and also in different departments, spending every day at least half an hour on a regulatory website looking at the changes. And you've got a lot of people doing exactly the same work every day, and that work is not necessary if the rule books and the data, the regulations are coming out of regulators in a digital form. But then that's just the beginning of the process. The remaining process is understanding whether it's applicable to you as an organization. Once you understand that, it's understanding which departments, which processes, which systems does it actually impact. And it's a huge project in every organization to implement it. A lot of people involved, everything is manual, and then mapping that back to policies, procedures. So by simply changing a way to release the rules in a digital form, we're actually automating a lot of compliance processes. Things don't get missed, things get accelerated, things get done in an automated way. But then with the current algorithms, which are already available today, you can start actually analyzing the new rules and run, for example, models which will tell you that this new rule is contradicting with what you have in your policies, and you need to change them. So actually augmenting and helping people to understand where the priority items are when regulatory change happens. And it's all possible once we've got digital regulation.
I think that it's potentially a way forward, and for all the reasons that Jay and I both have spoken about, right? Because it offers a number of benefits. But I think we would want to hear more from the industry regarding this as well, which is kind of why we put out the request for comments last year as part of the rollout of this initiative. Specifically, in what ways would they actually use tools like this? How would supplement or augment current efforts by the industry, whether it be vendors or in-house efforts by firms? And what does the development of a taxonomy look like as you think about from one regulator to another regulator and how those interplay? We did try to think about some of these issues, and we actually worked with a vendor to look at kind of how other rules may themselves be tagged and make sure that we're trying to be consistent from a broader approach. But that's an area that I think we would appreciate comment on and some thoughts from the industry.
Yeah, and I love that idea that evaluating rules from other regulators and other countries as well, and looking to harmonize them or align them, because that would make life easier for global financial institutions which are present across different countries?
I think there's potentially two ways, right? One is direct access, right? So if you are an investor or you are a small company that's looking to become a broker dealer, having kind of the machine readable rulebook available to you that allows you to potentially access the types of requirements that may apply in your situation. Obviously, ultimately, you may need to seek counsel in terms of making sure that you're in complete compliance, but at least as a way to get started, it's conservative. It's very much a useful tool. And for investors that may care about what are the appropriate things that apply in this case when I'm working with a broker or somebody else, it can be a tool that can be used to figure out kind of what are the types of requirements that may apply. In a kind of more in-depth manner, these tools can also be used as a way to kind of augment the ability of firms to kind of automate their compliance process. And as I was speaking about before, to the extent that they can save time in terms of kind of stuff that would have been done manually, they potentially can devote those resources into enhancing their overall compliance, which obviously has a direct benefit for investors.
I think if we look at the at a big picture of why do we have regulations? We have regulations to make products, services safer for the public, and where compliance programs don't follow regulations because it's difficult, it's it's expensive, we don't understand what the rules are which are applicable to us, then ultimately that leads to misconduct, that leads to error, human error, that leads to unsafe products on the market. So as a general view, I think, by digitizing regulation, by digitizing compliance, helping organizations to operate safer, ultimately bring safer products to the public. And that can be applied in any industry. Any industry that has got standards, regulations applicable to products, whether these are financial products or actual physical hardware products, they're there to make sure that we operate safely and bring safe products to the market. So I think there is a huge benefit to the public, ultimately, when we digitize a way to comply with regulations. And I also think there is, it's a huge potential for more innovation generally within the industry, because if it's easier to understand the regulations for a new entrant, it's cheaper to get a license, it's cheaper to it's cheaper to comply with regulations, then you can direct the funds which you would have spent on compliance towards innovation and to products and services.